All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us, whether you're in person or you are virtual. Thank you for joining us. So we actually have a lot to do tonight. I want to think of tonight as different segments. I said, instead of giving lots of different shiur on different topics, I want to try to give you a few what I call Seder hacks, just to make it more exciting or more streamlined, etc. And I also want to give you, 4 is always a secret number for Pesach. So I want to give you 4 of those. I want to give you 4 short, heavy, sweet punches, things that you could share at your Seder, which will be streamlined with the hacks, as you'll see. And I still want to have 20 minutes for questions that you may have on Pesach. Not stump the Rabbi questions. Sincere, I want to know what to do. How do I kasher this? How do I kasher that? So we'll get there also. We'll have enough time for everything. And I never like when classes are too long. So that's why, hopefully, the classes that you hear from me aren't too long. Okay. So here we go. First of all, to start things off, so someone mentioned to me that they noticed I got a haircut. I did get a haircut. I got one yesterday. Right? You have to start getting ready early. And so I went yesterday to Tony the barber, go to the shopping mall. You ever know Tony's? He always told me, Rabbi, I'm more Jewish than you. I'm more Jewish than you. So I sit down in his chair and he says, so Rabbi, first of all, I noticed you're coming a week early. It's dangerous, So do you go all the way to the 49th day, only to the 33rd day? And I say, no, 33. He's like, okay, but what about Yom Ha'atzmaut? Do you do that also? I said, no, that I don't do. 33 days. It's like, okay, so I'll give you a 3 instead of a 4. It'll be long at the 33rd day, but at least it's he's very knowledgeable. He said, if it wasn't for I can't have my Parmesan cheese on my meatballs, I'd go for it. I'd become Jewish. But that's what's holding me back. Okay, so with that said, I want to start off with the hacks. Let's have some fun over here and just advice. That obviously everyone in the room pretty much has more experience than me running a Seder, but everyone has their own perspective, and just like I could learn some tips from you, maybe my experience running Seders for the past 10 odd years will also leave you with some new things to think about, make it fun, make it more streamlined. The first thing, one of the more fun ones I have for you tonight is just, I guess, a resource, just an idea. I actually have these ones printed out if you want to take, but one of them is an idea you could do yourself. I used to with my kids, everything's age appropriate also. So my kids are 9, 6, and 3. You might have grandkids that age, or your kids might be that age, or you could always just have fun, even if you have all adults around the table. One thing I always used to do during the 10 makos is I would pretend it was like an emergency, and I would tell my kids to call 911, or I would call 911, right? And I would pretend to be the Egyptian telling the police what's going on. So you kind of act it all out, and you I always try to get all 5 senses involved, like how it smells disgusting because the frogs are rotting, and I check my boiler and it's full of frog boiled. And I would try to either call a service or the police of the emergency and try to really bring it to life. And a new thing I thought of this year that we could use, don't worry, is especially if you have teenagers around your table. My kids aren't really there yet, but I'll have, I'll have a nephew around the table this year who will definitely appreciate this. We know that one of the hot topics in the media for the past couple months is ChatGPT, artificial intelligence. I gave a drasha, which I didn't write myself. The drasha was written by AI, right? John knows a lot about that one, right? So just 40 minutes ago, I typed into an hour and a half ago, ChatGPT, to write me a memoir as an Egyptian and the eye perspective, the eye point of view, what it was like to live and to experience Dam on side 1, right? And Sfardeya on side 2, okay? I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but I have 25 copies. You can take one home, or you can do this yourself on your favorite makkah, or your kid's favorite, your grandkid's favorite makkah. But look at this. It's just unbelievable. I didn't have literally the prompt was just what I just told you. It says, as an Egyptian during the time of the plague of blood, life was nothing short of a nightmare. The once crystal clear water of the Nile, which had sustained us for generations, had turned into thick red sludge that reeked of decay and death. It started slowly, with the water turning pale pink, almost imperceptible at first. But as the days passed, the river grew darker and darker, and became a gory pool of blood that no one dared to touch. The stench was unbearable, and we could feel the sickness in the air. Our crops wilted and died, our animals fell ill, and our people suffered from thirst. and famine. That's only half. Okay, flip over to Sfardeya. As an Egyptian during the time of the plague of the frogs, life was a nightmare. So that's not too creative. It is a computer. Don't forget. You can switch it up. The air, you can literally say, that was too so much for the first one. Can you change it up a little bit? And it will. It will be in 2 seconds. The air was thick and the croaking of countless amphibians, and every inch of our homes, streets, and fields were overrun with them. At first, we thought it was just temporary inconvenience, but as the days passed, it became clear that this was no ordinary infestation. The frogs were everywhere in our beds, in our pots, in our pans, and even in our food. It was impossible to escape their constant presence, and the smell of rotting flesh that followed them was unbearable. That last paragraph, I'll just skip. Looking back at those dark days, I am reminded, I'm not sure how to survive, but okay. I am reminded of the power of nature and the importance of humility in the face of its awesome power. Nature's power, God. The plague of the frogs may have been a terrible trial, but it taught us valuable lessons about fragility of our existence and the need to cherish every moment of life. It even says in the middle, I love this. But in the end, it was the power of our faith that saved us. Our prayers were unanswered. It describes how it prayed to all the regular gods. Right, this is something, especially with a teenager in the house, like, cool. Zadie's using Chat GPT. First of all, Zadie didn't know what Chat GPT, and here Rabbi's claiming class, right? And the fact you bring, and it really, just like, I mean, it does a better job than ICE if you're calling 911. But you see, it gets the senses involved, and like you think, okay, frogs are everywhere. You know, when I was a kid, I thought like I wish I could live in the muck of Sfardeya. You like frogs, catch frogs, play with, right? It was like a fun thing. But like you read this, it's like, no, that wasn't fun. You can do this to whatever muck you want, any play you want, and it really brings it home. Any of you are interested, I do have copies you can take it after. But again, you could just use any element of the Mitzrayim experience and pop it into Chat GPT, and it's a lot of fun to play with kids or teenagers around the table. It really makes it real and brought to life. Okay, I'm still in hack number 1. I know it's a little funny, but the second thing is this amazing artist. Okay, he's actually works in outreach in the UK. His name is Moshe Freeman, Rabbi Moshe Freeman. Related? Not related? Not related. Okay. So he is an amazing, if you appreciate like a lyricist, he in a previous lifetime, previous chapter in his life, he was obsessed with rap. Okay, so he puts out these videos of rap. And 5-6 years ago, he had this rap that he put out called The Confessions of a Passover Traitor. Okay, I won't do the whole thing, but I have this character that I do, his name is DJ Exodus. Ask, but I go out of the room and I invite DJ Exodus, and he comes in with this rap, and I'll show you in the Divrei Torah section where I bring this in. But just to give you a sense of like his koach, his power of words, okay? With each passing Passover Seder, I've started to feel more and more like a traitor as I tell my kids about freedom we're displaying through the wine and stories and the praying. I'm not sure I believe what my mouth is saying, and it goes on, and there's a beautiful theme. Do we have any idea what freedom means when society's adults, children, and teens spend a third of our lives on our screens with likes and thumbs up replacing hugs, releasing endorphins in our brains like drugs? And while we mindlessly scroll down our news feed, social media records what we read and sells our data to companies that convince us of what we need, having perfected and designed ways to influence the mind, hoping we don't realize we've been anchored in prime. And it goes on and on about like assessing our physical belongings and the blurred lines between wants and needs. And it's just like a powerful, call it a poem. It's written in the style of rap, but it's a powerful piece which is at any time you want during the Seder, even if it's during Shulchan Aruch, and an entertainment break. Again, if you're Zadie, you're rapping, you're Bobby, and you're rapping, forget it. You want the Iniflef over just like that. This is something I like to use. I first used it at a communal Seder one time, and it went over really well, and I try to bring it up again, age appropriate, and it was around my table. But I also do have copies over here. But after he came out with it, it was obviously 4 years ago, right before Pesach. I actually got his contact information and asked him to like email me the lyrics, and that's how I have it saved in a Word document. So again, you are welcome to take that if you want. So the hack number 1 is just find creative ways. Call 911, Chat GPT, rap. Find, like, you remember that Chazal, like connecting it to like real Ruchnias over here. Chazal, there's like, we dip the karpas into salt water, and the Gemara says, why do we do that? Why do we hide the afikomen? The Gemara tells us for one simple reason: we want the kids to be engaged. We want them to it's late already, give them an afternoon nap for sure, but we want them to be up and rowdy and inquisitive and curious, and anything we could do to like break, like dad doesn't usually rap, dad doesn't usually present us like a chat, like anything we could do, like it could be Chazal would have said rap instead of sealed off Claman if they had those ideas, right? There's certain things we have in place at the Seder which are designed not because they're intrinsically valuable, but they're designed in order to like just so it changed the pace a little bit. So people are like, what's going on over here? Let's ask a question. Let's get involved. It essentially really just to engage the kids in the crowd around your table. So these are just what I think are modern iterations of that same idea. And it's up to us to know who's around the table, the age, and try to find creative ways to bring the story to life. Run around. My kids were little, used to run around the table in pajamas, Caro in pajamas in the middle of the night. And my kids are still little. I might have to do that again. But like all those, right? One of my kids, it's 3. So all those things to do, like I used to pretend that I was Moshe and one of the sheep got lost, and go find the sheep and return it to the flock. The Medrash, that's how Hashem knew that he was so empathy. He had so much empathy, and he was the one who needed to lead the Jewish people. Like any story in Chazal or in the Midrashim that you could act out, right? Even the post can bring down that you should take the matzah, throw it on your shoulder, and run around the table like it's a burden because it's matzah's only, it's the bread of affliction. Like all these things that we could act out and really connect all the senses to, and find other ways just to bring the message to shake people up and say, wow, that's something, that's an interesting way of presenting it. All those are goals. So take this idea, these specific ideas, or the general ideas, and be creative yourself and figure out ways to do. We all grew up. I grew up with my father throwing plastic frogs and breaking glasses and we're filled with wine already. Those are also ideas, anything like that, but everyone knows those ideas already. So these are ideas that you may have not considered. Okay, that's hack number 1, is just find ways to act it out in new creative ways. Number 2 is tonight, your kids, your grandkids, go home if you haven't done it already and start building anticipation. By the time the night of the Seder comes, you want the kids to be like just needing the Seder. Like, so we haven't started quite yet, but we always like to try to encourage the kids. We have arts and craft kits and paint things, and they draw pictures of the different makos and the carbon pesach, and we hang it up in the room that we're going to have the Seder in. Usually we take a doorway, we take like a blue tablecloth, and we cut it in half and we cover a door that way. So it's like it's like the Kriyas Yam Suf. So at the end of the Seder, you're supposed to feel like you're there. So that's what we do. We go with our kids and we cross to the Yam Suf, and they make it, of course, they feel very much empowered. And part of it's like, like I mentioned before, the Haggadah says, like really, a lot of the preparations start sooner than later. And the sooner you can start building that anticipation and they're excited. I always have this ongoing argument. I always like to surprise the kids with things. My wife will, like, she's right. No, let's tell them so they can anticipate and look forward to it. So when we give them to them, they're already so excited about it. Whether it's a trip we're planning, etc. Like, instead of surprising them, allow them, give them the gift of that pent-up anticipation, so that like it's like letting the horse out of the onto the racetrack. They're so excited about it. So that is a huge part of getting the kids excited about it, is start early, and in any way you could think of, build anticipation and tell them about perhaps the system you have in place, that you ask a question, present them from something from school. You're going to get a candy, or you're going to get like a token. If all the kids or grandkids collectively collect X amount of tokens, we will go here for Chalamite trip. Find like just different ways and tell them what the Seder is going to look like, so they're so excited about it by the time it comes. So that is the second Seder hack. The third Seder hack, which I think is just a beautiful concept to think about. Usually we think of the Shulchan Aruch when the meal is served as kind of like the break. It's all busy, Manishtana and the 4 kids, and everyone's switching off with a paragraph to read. And then Shulchan Aruch is just like a regular Shabbos meal, right? And it is. I mean, there's no chametz there, right? But it's just a seudah, and that's what it's supposed to be, and we shouldn't take away from that. But use that, and I've been thinking about this a lot more recently as my oldest kid is getting a little bit older, and she could really understand, what a family unit is, and understand the concept of past and future, and use the Shulchan Aruch opportunity to talk about your personal family history. And I'll tell you why, and I'll give you specific ideas. There's an amazing article. Don't read it before Pesach, because they might just bring it up in one of the Pesach rushes. Spoiler alert. So look, wait, just wait a little bit. But it was written in the New York Times in 2015 or 2013 by a fellow named Bruce Feiler. And the title, if you Google it, is called The Story That Binds Us. And there was a lot of, he piggybacked off a different psychologist research from Duke University. And this research was claimed that it found the secret sauce, it found the magic of the differentiating factor of which families have successful children and which families do not have successful children. Now, it does not define what success is, so that's a little bit of an empty hole, but we know what success is from our perspective. And the difference is not how much wealth the family started with, not all the things that, the education that the family was able to provide for the children. That wasn't the it factor. A lot of families who are able to give so much in education top, and still their children are not successful, okay? They're not impacting the world in a positive way. But he, and piggybacking off her work, claimed that the discovery was that families who teach their children, and ultimately children who understand what he calls the family, their own personal family narrative, the trials and tribulations that their own grandparents went through, and ultimately survived and persevered. Now, it's one thing to tell your grandchildren, like I think I've told you guys this before. Chai's getting too old for this already, but I used to say, like, when they're learning like the partials of Bereshis, of Lech Lecha, and Sefer Bereshis, I would tell my daughters, Chaya, who I saw today? I saw the great granddaughter of Sarah, of Avraham. I met her today. What? Really? Where is she? So I say, come on, she's in her house. Come. And I bring her to a mirror, So she's looking at herself, right? And that's a powerful thing for them to realize. But there's only so you can't really see. There's only to a certain extent until you get older and you plug in the concept of Emunah. There's only so much a 6-year-old, a 9-year-old, even a 15-year-old could, not an 18-year-old could see themselves in the Pesach story, in Yetzias Mitzrayim, which essentially is that our ancestors went through a tremendous amount of trials and tribulations, but we emerged into something greater than we would have been without those trials and tribulations. That's what Mitzrayim was. We'll see in one of the Divrei Torah, you can connect to this idea. But if you tell your kid, like, Chai, you're named after Babi Dora, she was Babi Jenny's mother, it's not so far off. You never met her, obviously, Adina, you met her, but Chai didn't. Right? And you explained to her who she was and the trials and tribulations. And I'm not going to get too personal over here, but everyone has in their own story, in their own family stories of, we have a beautiful article was once published in the Reader's Digest on my great grandfather, who I'm named after. His brother was murdered by anti-Semites in pre-Holocaust, what we now call Ukraine, but back then White Russia. And they couldn't get over it, so they wrote a Sefer Torah. And once the family came to Canada, they had to smuggle the Sefer Torah into Canada. We have letters between the family and the Prime Minister of Canada at the time, helping us smuggle the Torah. This is all published in Reader's Digest. So now that Adina's getting older, I could read that Reader's Digest. This is who your father, me, is named after. This is our family. This is us. So it connects the concept of Yetzias Mitzrayim to them. It's much more personal. If you could explain who they're all named after, why you named after them, and it going back a couple generations. Sometimes it takes research of us parents. I'm before Pesach asking my mother, clarify what was his name, the brother of, and I go into Seder, hopefully more knowledgeable of my own family, and share that with my children. So we teach them our claimants, not yours, but our claimant, our family narrative. And hopefully, as one element that we could plug into the tried and tested research, that the successful children come by understanding the family narrative, which ultimately the family narrative is Yetzias Mitzrayim, no doubt. That's the Pesach Seder, is to preserve the family narrative, the national family narrative. No one has a greater family narrative than the Jewish people. But to take that concept and bring it to them in a more palatable context, so you could explain them your personal family story. So as a family, as a nation, and then they could also connect that as a person, as an individual, that my difficulties in life that I have or that I will have later, you insert and you plant that deep-rooted emunah that the best to come is only through the trials of perseverance. And life isn't always rainbows and butterflies and perfect. And it was never like that for the Jewish people. And we are who we are today, Jewish people, claiming family, kids around the table, 8 o'clock, whatever it is, because you will be able to live the message, the midah, the characteristic of perseverance, just like who you're named after did, just like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, just like our Moshe and the Jewish people who went to Mitzrayim. So that, I think, find some time in the Seder, even find, if you find pictures that aren't hung up of the great grandparents, and explain to them who they were and how they got to Canada. There's obviously lots of stories that each family has. So find some way in the most natural downtime to do that is when all the food is being served, and it's a Shabbos, so there's no official thing that you need to be saying as fast as you could, just so the kids don't fall asleep while you're saying it, right? This is like a time that you can actually start talking to them, because there's not so much you need to say. So I think Shulchan Aruch, to kind of make Shulchan Aruch great again. It's not just a break. You have a tremendous opportunity at the end of the Seder to engage your children, and I think to use that downtime as a way to bring out your own family narrative and communicate that to your children is a beautiful, beautiful opportunity. The last Seder hack that I'll share with you, the fourth one, is to arm yourself. Let me give you an easy number with 6 divrei Torah. If you're leading the Seder, if you're either the Batman or the Robin, and the leading the Seder doesn't matter. Together, a family should have, the adults should have 6 divrei Torah. You don't necessarily have to use all of them, but each divrei Torah but I would advise that you should be able to encapsulate the lessons of our Torah on a very personal level. You can almost they talk about, icebreakers. When you have a crowd, you want to ask a question, break the ice. So everything should essentially be able to, time may not allow it to, but essentially be able to start a roundtable discussion about the Devar Torah that you are sharing. And to give you examples, we're going to shift to segment number 2, now that the hacks are over, and we'll share what I hope to get to 4 divrei Torah, which I think are impactful. They're short, so it doesn't take a long time to explain. And I think you can make them personal, and they do focus on one of the main element of what we're supposed to focus on, which is the story of Mitzrayim. We're not getting derailed into, Kiben Shibim Shana, he grew his beard and now he's old because he was younger. There's really nothing to do with Yetzias Mitzrayim. So we want to stay focused on divrei Torah that stay focused on the story or on the lessons of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So the first one I'll share with you, which I can almost guarantee you've never thought of before, you've never seen, because I was exposed to it through a super niche sefer. A friend of mine's old 9th grade Rabbi in yeshiva wrote a sefer called Birchas Ish, which you never heard of and you probably will never be able to find. I don't think in print anymore. And my father had a copy, probably sells a copy. And in there, in the back, there is a section on Haftarah, and he says a beautiful Devar Torah about the egg that's on the Seder plate. Why is the egg on the Seder plate? And I know that already the classical understanding, so we don't have the circle of life, we don't have the base of Mikdash, maybe connected to Tisha B'Av. If you're like me, if you're Hungarian, you're not like me, but Hungarians I know have a minhag to specifically eat the egg. Okay, our custom, Claman family, the general Ashkenaz custom, and for a lot of Jews, is nothing happens with the egg whatsoever. There's no cameo. Everything else on the Seder plate has its moment to shine. You pick it up, you point it, you eat it. Tomorrow, it all has a moment. It's cameo in the Seder. But the egg, at least on my Seder plate, is the only thing that nothing happens to. So what's it doing there? Okay, so there's a lot of beautiful explanations. A lot of them are pretty negative, like connecting to the fact that we don't have the base of Mikdash, which is an important negative emotion for sure. But here's something which is so beautiful. The egg is the only thing in the physical world, or at least the best example in the physical world, which can either be inanimate or a life source. In other words, it represents, and it symbolizes the shift from pure potential into actuality. The egg could either be your breakfast, right? Scrambled eggs, sunny side up, however you like it. Or if you just leave it instead of taking it, and the mother bird sits on the egg and gives it TLC, tender loving care, so then it turns into an efroach, it turns into a life, which could later in life lay its own eggs and have new generations of little chickens that we could eat. Right. Take away the romantic side of things. But what it symbolizes is it's something. What else in the world could either be inanimate and thank you. It could either be inanimate or could be a vivifying life source that represents a continuum. What else is there? There might be other examples, but this is like the quintessential perfect symbol of that thing, right? So the message of having that on the table, the Birchas Ish, I don't know his name, it argues or posits, is to remind us that the Jewish people didn't present any actuality or much actuality when Hashem said it, I want them. In fact, the Medrash tells us that the angels came to God and argued and complained. Why are you choosing the Jews over the Egyptians? Okay, God, the angel said, I get why you want your people. I get it. You want your people. You got to give the Torah to someone. You got to have ambassadors in the world. But why don't you choose the Egyptians, the Mitzvah, over the Jews? Halalu of Devarazar, halalu of Devarazar. They're both the same theologically. I mean, their theology. They're both pagans. They're both idolaters. The Jewish people have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, over 200 years. And we had made a lot of concessions in the way we thought about life and the way we serve God or gods. They're no longer the Jewish people that you remember God, the angels are saying, of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And Hashem argued back and says, no, I'm choosing them because I believe in their potential. And he chose us, he sat on us, so to speak, and we hatched our Sinai, we accepted the Torah. Modern state of Israel, Jewish people around the world learning Torah more so now than any other time previously in history. We hatched, right? Who was right, the angels or God? God was right. Because even though we look like breakfast, we look like an inanimate object, we look like nothing. And that's the justification of the angel's argument in the Midrashic teaching. But Hashem believed in us, and he sat on us, he cared for us, and we hatched, and we flew, right? And now we are who we are, which is a beautiful thing. So the way you can make this personal, ask the people on your table, have you ever accomplished something that surprised you? That was like, wow, I didn't know I could do that. You brought out something new and you actualized something that was dormant and only in potential. If kids around the table, maybe it was some initiative they took in school or some idea. Adults around the table could definitely get involved in that question. A full-grown adult told me the other day that one time when he was younger, he was asked to give a shiur, and he said, no, I can't give a shiur. And then the guy said, please, like, I really need you to fill in. So he said, fine, he did it. And this guy happens to be like a world-renowned, sought-after public speaker, right? But at that moment, your brother, right? So it's the moment that the guy said, do you want to give a shiur? He said, no, I can't give it. And then he did it. He said, wow, I could do this. And then whether or not he acted on it right away or later in life, but he brought out something that if he was never challenged, he didn't take the yuzma, the forthcoming initiative to do that, it would have never been brought out. And that was Jewish people where we were an inanimate egg. And Hashem said, I know that there's potential in these people. You can make that person around the table by asking people, is there something that you see in your life in the past year, in the past 5 years, past 10 years, past 30 years, that there was a moment like, wow, I could do that. And that really brought to life a new element of your character. And that is the lesson of one of the core lessons of Yetzias Mitzrayim, how much Hashem believed in us. And that is arguably what the egg symbolizes. Okay, that's idea number one of hopefully 4. Okay, the second idea, I love this idea. I hope I have it. This idea, okay. This is in Yachatz. In Yachatz, Yachatz, break it in half, and swinging arguments which one is bigger. Save one half for later, the Afikoman, the other half you keep. It's part of, right? First of all, again, what do? I go with my head. Why? Because the kids think it's hilarious. That's it, right? It's a modern day Afikoman. If you smash the matzah with your head, I mean, I'm usually a pretty cultured person around the table, right? And now I'm smashing a matzah across my forehead, like I'm like some martial artist, like, and the kids are laughing. So that's like, boom, okay? Now, which one is bigger? You get everyone involved. You take a survey. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not obvious. Right? You can even play the trick on your game, on your kids, your grandkids. If you have older grandkids and younger grandkids, you go around the table. This is amazing research that if there's 2 lines on the board, one is clearly longer than the other. Everyone in the room is actors except for you. I go around the table, Josh, which one is bigger? And you say the smaller one, right? You're an actor. If you're planted, you say the smaller one is bigger. And everyone votes for line A. And I said, which one is longer? And line A is clearly smaller. By the time I get to you, the statistical chances of you saying the right answer are less than half. About 20, I think if I remember correctly, 25% of the people will get it right because you've been conditioned around the room. You don't want to be the iconoclast, the only person who thinks it's the other line. So you can do that, right? You can get the kids and grandkids, the older grandkids, the older kids, to say the smaller one is bigger, and then see what the younger kids say. You can use your younger kids as human guinea pig, right? Test out psychology just for fun. That's for your fun, not for their fun. Okay, so what's going on with Yachatz? What do we do? We're breaking something and saving it for later. Absolutely beautiful. One of the nicer Haggadahs that you can get is translated to English also is Rav Rimon's Haggadah. I forget what it's called. It's absolutely beautiful. Rav Rimon in Israel. absolutely beautiful thinker. And I'm just going to read from you the English translation of what Yachatz represent. And it's absolutely, I think it's beautiful. Okay. Yachatz represents the moment of crisis, of rupture. Things fall apart. All seem broken and beyond repair. Yet, our faith lives on. The faith that destruction will eventually lead to progress and renewal. Sometimes things must be broken in order that they be rebuilt. In the darkest times, we must recall the greater process at hand. Already at Yachatz, at the beginning, we wait and anticipate the Afikomen. At the moment of crisis, as the bread of affliction is broken in two, as the bread of affliction that we're breaking again, we recognize this rupture as a stage, and we anticipate eating the matzah of freedom, the Afikomen, the piece of the rupture that we say. So it's a beautiful way to arc the beginning of the Seder to the end. Like, guys, what we're doing here is we're saying that the hardships of Egypt ultimately brought us to the state of Israel, to what we have now, to Yeshua going into building the Bayis Rishon, the Bayis Sheni. Okay, the Bayis Sheni was destroyed, but that rupture, same as Mitzrayim, is going to bring us to the Bayis Shlishi. And you could ask them on a personal level, did something ever happen to you that in a moment you thought that was really bad, like really, really bad? Like for a kid, that could be like they did bad on a test, right? But in their grade 4 reality, that's like really, really bad. But later on, you realize it actually made you better. Oh, I learned that I really do have to think about studying before the carpool on the way to school the day of the test, right? And then I learned that lesson, I learned that because I got a 3 out of 10 on my dictate. So I learned that, I have to think about it beforehand. So you thought it was so embarrassing when the teacher gave you and your girl next to you saw that you only got a 3 out of 10. It was really, really embarrassing, but you learned something. Now it won't happen again on more important tests or situations like, because you learned that lesson. And adults obviously can get personal as personal as they want. Like we've all had experiences like that, where we went through something really difficult. There was that rupture. And in the moment, there was nothing could get worse. Moshe, get out of here. It's we don't need your messages of better days, Kotzer Haruach, Babadakasha. This is so bad right now, we can't even compute the message of redemption. But then obviously after we were redeemed, oh, now I understand why we needed all of that, because it created us stronger people, so much so that God wanted us as his, right? So and if you get personal, again, this is going back to that fourth hack, try to bring the story home. And the more that you could take the message of the Divrei Torah that you're sharing, and you're asking the people to see it in their own life, the more you're dealing with gold, and that you're taking the yisodas, the fundamental ideas of what Yetzias Mitzrayim represent, and you're forcing people around the table, adults, children, teenagers, to see it in their life. And that's building true rock solid emunah, which is the only thing that we should be thinking about doing to the next generations at the Seder, is using these night, or if you're here these 2 nights, as a to fill up the tank of emunah, of faith of emunah, so it lasts the rest of the year. If you force them to see it in their own life, you're going to be doing a really, really acute and important job at that. Okay, that's the second idea. The idea of the rupture, the idea of the yachatz, and we save the piece for the afikomen. Okay. The fourth ideas I'll share with you is in the halach ma'anya. The halach ma'anya. So actually going back a little bit, so I meant to do it in chronological order. We did yachatz already, and now we're going. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah. So we are going in order. So after yachatz, we start magid, and the very first part of magid is the halach ma'anya. Why is it in Aramaic? It was added later in history. Okay, all that for it is great. I don't necessarily think that it is the ideal type of Torah to share personally. Take my advice. I have to say that, but here's a really here's why are we inviting guests? It's too late. Is there anyone coming to your Seder? You already did Kadeh, Shorchatz, Karpas. Anyone want to come over? Oh no, you already have a Seder. Sorry, okay. No one's going to hear you. You're sitting around the table and you're saying that Kol Dichben Yesev Yechol Kol Ditzrich Yesev Yitzad. Anyone who wants to come sit with us? It's just too late. We should have posted that in the WhatsApp chat before Yom Tov started. Why are we saying it over here? So one thing that you could share is we don't really think about this often enough, is that how valuable the concept of Hachnasas Orchem is when it comes to the story of Mitzrayim. I mean, number one, the only reason why Moshe wasn't left for death as opposed to being saved by Batya is because Batya took him into her own home. essentially. It's being machnes, this external person, into your own space. And then when Moshe had to run away to Midian, the sins were too hard, Yisro took him in. That's where he met his, I would say, better half. I feel like he can't get better than Moshe, but she must have been quite an incredible person, right? But that's when he met his spouse, and everything else came from there. So just we don't realize that those key, we just know the story, but oh yeah, that was Hachmas, that was inviting guests, and that was inviting guests. So the way we could, the way we could talk about this on a personal level is, do we have guests enough? It's never easy. It's sometimes it's a lot of fun, but sometimes it's not the most convenient thing. Does that mean we should stop doing it? Look what it did for the Jewish people back then. So it's just a nice idea that we could think about as well. Now, staying in Halach Ma'anya, we say this line of Hashta Chacha L'Shan Haba Be'arad Israel. Now we're here in Montreal. Next year we should be in Yerushalayim. That all makes sense. And we finish off right before the Manishtana Hashta Abde L'Shana Haba'a B'nei Chorin. This year we are Avadim, we're slaves. Next year we should be free. Okay, there's once to ask the question by way of the story. I read that there was a Seder that Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, former chief rabbi, right, father of the current chief rabbi of David Lau, was running a Seder for mostly secular chayalim, and probably chayalot, I would imagine. And he got up to this part, and one of the chayalim was like asking in a very aggressive way, like, are we going to be dealing with these arcane ideas? Like, we're slaves. Like, if this is what the whole night is about, I could just leave now. Like, he was like challenging with Lau, like, why are we saying now we're slaves? Next year we're not slaves this year. Okay, so what is this? So how can we relate to this? So Rav Lau answered a beautiful question, a beautiful answer, which is the chain is only any chain is only as strong as its weakest link. That's true. You and I sitting here in Montreal are not slaves. We're pretty free people. But there's Jews in Ukraine who are going through a really, really hard time. There's Jews in Islamic countries that are having a very, very hard time. So when we say that now we're in this certain form of slavery, it means that we're recognizing our connection with all the other Jews around the world. And I can't be stronger or more free than the weakest link of my brothers and sisters around the world. So we say next year, with the coming of the Messianic era, etc., all the Jewish people should find themselves in Israel as a Bnei Chor. And that's what Rav Lau shared around at that Seder. I just want to share my own idea. That was just the way to ask the question. That is a beautiful expression found in Hasidic Sfarim. That when we say now we're servants, it doesn't mean on a physical level. It means on a spiritual level. Okay, on a spiritual level, meaning that when we approach our mitzvot that we do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, when we approach Torah, in our thought process, do we say, "Oh, bye, sweetie, I have to go to shul now. I got it done," right? Right? I need. It's something something I need to do, right? Or is it something that you get to do, right? If you switch all our approaches, anytime you have to do something, instead of using that when you communicate to yourself or to other people, use it. You communicate it as an opportunity. If you are going to like a Montreal Canadiens game, you don't say like, "Oh, I have to go to Montreal Canadiens." Like, I gotta go. Bye. But we do that when we talk about shul, like guilty as charged sometimes. So, to be honest. But if all our Torah mitzvahs is an opportunity, that I get to go daven, I get to learn Torah today, I get to do chesed today, I get to put on tefillin today, I get to light Shabbos camp today. They're all an opportunity. So that is no longer the mindset of a slave. That's a mindset of a free person gets to do what he or she wants to do. A slave, if we're enslaved in the spiritual realm, it means that everything from this perspective, everything that we're doing is because it's obligatory. I need to do it to get paid. I have and that's not how we're supposed to do things, right? So when we're saying that now we're slaves and next year we should be b'nei chorin, we're saying that by next year we should have worked on ourselves enough that at least more so than the previous year, our mitzvahs are get to do it. Our mitzvahs are an opportunity and not an obligation. Great question to make this personal around the table for kids, teenagers, is what mitzvah do you feel you can't live with that? Ever thought of it that way? If there was one mitzvah that pooped out of existence, like what would get you depressed? Oh, I don't have that anymore. Like being honest with yourself, like if there was no tefillin anymore, would you like, shucks, I can't put on tefillin anymore? Or is like, okay, God didn't ask me to do it, so I have one less thing to do in the morning. Let's say like the whole mincha thing disappeared. Once in the morning, once at night. So mincha's really hard in the middle of the workday. It's not easy, and forget about it. right? So is that like, okay, there's one less thing to do? Or it's like, oh, now I can't connect to Hashem in the middle of my busy day with him. Like, and maybe there's no answer to the question which we could work on, everyone in their own right. But the challenge that you could press around the table, I think kids would have an easier time answering this than adults. So challenge adults, is there a mitzvah that you really feel that you wouldn't be able to live without, that you would be a sadder person without that mitzvah? And if you could find an answer to that, either if you can't find it this year, but you can find it by next year. So that's Hashta Avad and Shana Avad B'nei Chorin. Next year, I'll be free at least from the perspective of one mitzvah that I really see it as an opportunity. That's really, I wake up in the morning, I can't wait to do it. And I always tell more for the men in the room that we have an opportunity over Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed, most people don't put on tefillin, right? I don't put on tefillin. It's like a whole, like, so the night before, like on Isra Chag, the last day of Pesach, when you go to sleep, like, get yourself excited to put on, you haven't done it in a whole week, right? Like, get yourself, it's an opportunity to, like, be a bar mitzvah boy again. Like, I remember being excited, like, putting on after the awkward stage, like, finished. You're excited about it. So after a week of without doing it, of not doing it, are we excited for Shabbos? Are we excited for Yom Tov, especially as we approach Pesach? There's so much to do. Is the message to the kids that this is a chore, we got to clean the house, or is there a certain excitement because Pesach is coming and we're excited for that? And I think that's a beautiful idea to answer the question of why we're saying now we're slaves and we'll be free. It doesn't mean on a physical level, it means on an emotional perspective towards the spiritual world. Do we feel it as obligatory or do we feel them as an opportunity? And again, a great question to prompt the personal way of connecting this idea to people around the table's lives is asking that question of, is there a mitzvah that you can't live without? Okay. I don't know if that was 3 or 4, depends on how you calculate. Okay, let's call that. We'll see how the time goes. But for now, let's call that 3. So last one, I guess. Last one. I see. I wrote down 7, saying that I have to decide on 4 of them. That's not going to be easy. Okay, so let's do. Okay, let's do 2 more. Okay, let's do 2 more. Okay, so the first one is on the Manishtana. Okay, so we just finished Halach Manya. So the Manishtana, we have the 4 questions. Right? 4 questions. But I have a 5th question. The 5th question is why these 4 questions? Right? We asked 4 questions, but why these 4 questions? So Rabbi Rimon and others as well explain something beautiful. That everyone has their own way of really explaining the same concept. That the 4 questions are, in a modern day paraphrasing, what's the deal with the matzah? What's the deal with the maror? We don't do those other nights. And what's the deal with dipping? And what's the deal with lean? Those are the 4 questions. So if you really understand them all as one confusion with what's going on over here, you can see that 2 of the aspects represent freedom, and 2 of the aspects represent distress or slavery or servitude. Right? Matzah is, as we said, halach ma'anya. We just said it's the bread of affliction. And the maror is obviously bitter. But the other 2, the reason why we dip is because wealthy people dip, right? Or people just eat what they have. They don't have extra dips and flavors. If you want this salad dressing or that salad dressing, that's like more of a luxury. And leaning obviously is leaning to the left is imitating royalty the way they at least used to eat. So the children are essentially asking, like, what are we doing tonight? Are we trying to relive the slavery and like remember how hard it was, or are we trying to pretend like we're royalty with our finest dishes out there, with wearing our nicest dresses and suits? Like, it just is confusing. Like, what are we doing? Well, it's like this bipolar acting. Like we're sad and we're expressing servitude, at the same time we're all joyous because we were free. So what are we doing over here? And the answer, of course, is matchil begenos. We say Avadim hayinu l'paro mitzrayim. We were slaves, but Hashem took us out and redeemed us. So I say, I remember just a couple of weeks ago, my little kid Alicia fell or did something. He was crying. I mean, that happens like 3 times a day, so that's not a shocker. But I have this tactic sometimes. I don't know what goes on, right? So obviously, but oftentimes if it's like a superficial crying, you just like make something goofy happen or tickle a kid and they start laughing. I'm like, you could defuse the whole situation that way. And I did that, and I was successful. And I picked Alicia up after, and it was like very interesting image because he still had his puffy eyes, there was tears on his cheek, and he was like still quivering a little bit, but he was laughing. And that image, I remember thinking, like, okay, I'm preparing for Pesach right now. Like, that is the question of the Manishtana of the children. Like, if you look at that picture of like the tears on the cheek, but he's laughing, like that's the stira contradiction in the emotion. So like, are we leaning and dipping, or are we like eating matzah and eating maror? Like, what's going on over here? And the answer is that we want to re-experience the struggles so we can appreciate the redemption. And the more we can put ourselves, the reason why we're doing both is because the more we can re-experience the hardships of the Jewish people, then the more we'll be able to appreciate the redemption. And you could ask, you could prompt the people around the table, can you think of a struggle that happened in your life that ultimately made you stronger? Okay, it's a personal question, which is similar to one of the previous ones that we spoke about, but from a different angle for sure. Lastly, I'll share with you that when we start understanding all the psukim, one thing that we, right after the Isha Amda, we say Vayager Sham, that Yaakov, when he originally went down to Egypt, Malamed Shalo Yared Yaakov Avinu Lishtakev Mitzrayim Ela Lover Sham, that Yaakov's perspective and mindset was it was only going to be temporary and transit. He never meant it on a permanent level. And if you think about that, knowing the story of Yaakov, Yaakov was running away from Israel because it was a famine. It's obviously after the whole story with Yosef and the brothers, but there was no food there, and that's why the brothers went down to Egypt. So he went from a place, Israel, that had no food, no opportunity, no family. All of Yosef's family was already in Mitzrayim, and Yaakov was going to reconnect with all his family to get food, to live in the area in the world that had the highest technological advancements. I mean, Mitzrayim, I think it was the one place that had food, right? Everything was going from Mitzrayim. So he was leaving a place that had nothing, and he went to the promised, they say in America, in Israel, they call it Artsot Habrit, the promised land, right? The land of opportunity. And you went from like nowhere to the place where there was jobs for you, and there was security, there was food, there was beautiful agriculture and technological advancements. You would think that Yaakov would go permanently. But Yaakov knew that once you leave Israel, you're not home. And then you see that the Haggadah emphasized that Yaakov, even with that terse leaving a place of nothing and nowhere, and going to the place of opportunity, even Yaakov from that reality had the right mindset of Shlo Yared Yaakov Avinu Lishtakev Mitzrayim Ela Ulav Sham. He went there as a temporary dwelling place, and obviously other things happened, but that was Yaakov's intention. So I think a really important conversation to have around the Seder. The Seder is reflection on the past, but it's also Lashon Haba B'Yerushalayim, but Lashon Haba B'nei Choron, like we already seen in Halach Ma'anya. So you ask the people around the table, that is it possible to feel too at home in insert wherever you're giving your Seder? So is it possible to feel too at home in Montreal? And if it's a yes or no question, if the answer is yes, so what's the line? Like how like is it that we forget to talk about Israel for a whole week? That we have a whole Shabbos together where we're talking as a family, Friday night Shabbos, we're blabbering the whole day to each other, and Israel doesn't come up once? Does that mean we're too comfortable here? Have we forgotten where our ultimate home needs to be and ought to be? Presently, we have reasons why we need to be here, but if we lose, Yaakov had every reason to think of Mitzrayim as home because there was nothing back there for him, but he still went temporarily. So is it possible for us to feel too at home in the diaspora? If so, what? That's a great conversation for Shulchan Aruch. And to point out over here that Yaakov had that perspective, even though he was coming to absolutely everything and opportunity, he still saw Mitzrayim as not home. Right? So there's a concept that I often speak about and often struggle with, like is home there, is home here? Obviously, both have elements of having home, but if you have only your element of over here, you've gone too far. And you always have to feel at home in Israel and connected to Israel. And tonight, the night of Seder, when we're looking at the Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, if you really want to at least pretend like you mean it, you have to also insert the value in your family that Israel is our home and Montreal is where we are now, and in certain elements we call it our home, but is there a line that we can't cross as a family to be too settled and too permanent, at least in our perspective, outside of Israel? So that was 4 hacks, and that was 4 different Torah, which I think are on point and could be explained on a very personal level. And I said you had 20 minutes for question and answer, which we could do, but please, if you have places to go to, especially if you don't have questions, feel free to go. And if you don't have any questions, we can enter over here. Any Pesach, pre-Pesach, getting ready. I guess everyone knows that Kasha their ovens by now, right? Yes, no, yes.
Question,
Sure.
awful question. As some cleaning up, if you wait 24 hours before you leave it unused.
great question. The answer is no, with an asterisk. Okay, and an asterisk is really no, because the self-clean ovens get so hot that it gets the halachic setup of libun gamar, and libun gamar doesn't take away the chametz taste outside, but rather it destroys it in its place. So we don't need to wait 24 hours before you do self-clean. If you think that your self-clean oven, sometimes I just heard this from people, it doesn't really work, it shuts off early. So if you want to just make sure, if you're not confident in your self-clean oven, so you could wait 24 hours, and even if it doesn't happen perfectly, it definitely got hotter than it does usually. But if you're confident your self-clean oven works, and the instructions say it's going to be an hour and a half, it's even longer for most, and last time you did it, that's how long it lasted for. There's no reason to wait 24 hours. There's no real reason to even clean it well before. I mean, you want to make sure that like the soft parts, make sure the door doesn't slam, that's cleaned, at least with caustic spray. You can't get all the little crumbs, but in the inside of the oven, if you can self-clean, it's going to absolutely destroy everything. Yes.
You break them up. Why do you think that there's big
Is that a personal question about me breaking on my head? No. So what's the question?
Why don't they tell you to split it down the middle? Why do they go to the trouble of telling you?
I mean, I think it's pretty much impossible to make an absolute perfect.
So they tell you the trouble to take the bigger piece.
Right. It's just to get the
full shawarma with no breaks.
Yeah. Essentially, that element of yachats is to get the kids engaged. That's what it's for. Right. If you buy, take the small one and say Republic phone, it's all good. Yeah.
Small.
Yes.
We have to take the bigger one though?
I've heard that the MK has come out with a ruling that you cannot kosherize Caesar stone and quartz countertops, which seems like a bit of flumer.
Not the recording. So look, I'm not going to get involved in arguments between different kosher organizations. I would say check the CRC, check the OU, and all these major kosher organizations are extremely reliable. And if you feel you've been doing one thing for many years and you've been doing it every year and you get validated by, I would say, the OU or the CRC, the Star K or the MK, you're good to go. If I felt strongly one way or the other, I would say my opinion is, but I don't have an opinion about that. I kick the can up the ladder, the question up the ladder to the major cautious organizations.
A question came in on the.
Oh wow.
Says, if you cover the plata up like foil and use on the face.
Yeah, good question. Good question. So generally we don't do it. It based.
Repeat the question.
Yes. Repeat the question. So hot plates that we use for Shabbos, you plug them in and have one standard heat. Could you kosher those or cover those before Pesach? So those are at a very awkward stage where they get hot enough to absorb the taste, but we can't really get the chametz taste. We can't really get them hot enough that we're confident that we can kosher them. And since we really use it on a regular basis, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, but we can spill on it, lots of chametz. So practice is, let me call it like the minhag, the custom is to not use them on Pesach, to get a separate Pesach one. You corner me in the corner and say, what's the halacha? Yeah, if you double cover it, the halacha is that it'll be okay for Pesach. But again, sometimes, especially Pesach time, we have lots of customs which go a little bit above, like you do line, everyone lines the shelves of their fridge. Okay, little secret. It's not hot, it's not liquidy, it can't absorb any taste. But the custom is we line it. Am I telling you not to line it? No, I'm telling you to line it because that's the custom. You don't have to make yourself crazy that there's a millimeter on the corner that my arts and crafts skills weren't good enough, that there's a little area on my fridge shelf that wasn't cut. You don't drive yourself crazy, but the custom is to cover the shelves. And included in that are many things. And one of the things is a hot plate. We do not use a hot plate that we use year round for Pesach. Yes. Good question. Theoretically, yes, but it would take lots of skills with the blowtorch. So on record, what we tell everyone is no, you can't, because you have to get the entire cavity like really blazing hot to leave in gomer like a self-clean oven, because it's used by directly the heat. And nowadays we live in a world where you can go buy, for $40, $50 Canadian Tire, something like that, like something that'll last you a week if you want a camping trip. So again, the assumed practice is do not kosher your barbecue for Pesach, get a Pesach one. Yes. Mm.
On mom and the dad's
Yeah.
side. So, as a child, I grew up. I told my children that if I go back to my parents' house during Pesach.
Yeah.
I will eat kidney because I grew up. with it. But at our house, we don't. That applies to that daughters are asking, how about this?
Right. Great question. I love that question. So you're doing the right thing because the minhag is that minhagim follow the husband, father, which means that your children are in your family. So their minhagim are going to be Ashkenaz minhagim, not Sephardic minhagim. Now, just in general, because someone was asking me after Myra, let's say your best friend's party family or your parents invite your family over. So what's best practice? The best practice is to remember one core halacha, that kitnios is not chametz. You just can't eat kitnios. So that means, I personally have spoken about this with my Rabbi in Israel, and that means that if a Sephardi friend wants to invite me over, there could be rice on the table, and the pot that he cooked the fish in could have had rice in it the day before, because we don't have to worry about like if a pot was used for chametz, chalila, we can't use it on Pesach. But if they used it for rice and the next day cook the fish without kitnios, I could eat that fish no problem, and there could be rice on the table. I just don't scoop it onto my plate, no problem. Yeah. Yes.
We do Erev Tafshil here, and in Israel they don't do it this year.
1 second. Let me. Yeah, because the second day of Yom Tov is Chol Hamoed for them, so we'll do it here. Anything else? The whole question and answers section without asking the rabbi if you can touch your microwave. Bonus points for the crowd. Yes.
Black coffee.
Yeah. Like usually during the year, black coffee on Pesach. Like, why? No. As much as that is kosher, that means we're okay with the way they wash. Like, lattes is a whole other rabbit hole. Go online, look it up. There's different signs which coffees are ideal to order, which ones aren't. But like on Pesach, like unless it's a kosher Pesach mashgiach in there, don't go near anything. But black coffee itself, just the beans, whether it's ground or whole, does not need kosher Pesach. So you can buy like whole beans from Starbucks or Martin's, grind them at home, and that's okay for Pesach.
Probably wrong, but
Okay,
the reason
next.
for
No,
the reason for Afikoman is that it's supposed to represent the Karma Pesach, right?
it's like in lieu of the promise. Yeah.
So the reason that we hide it is because the Karma Pesach wouldn't really touch it, right? So why then is it a thing to hide it there? Wouldn't it be like hide it and don't look for it?
Don't
Hide
find
it in
it.
a place that nobody will
Right.
find
So
it?
there's many explanations as like exactly what the Afikoman. That's one of them for sure. But again, that whole thing of being chotek, the Gemara, in times of the Gemara, we hide it, and our kids find it, right? So in the times of the Gemara, it was the kids steal it from the person running the Haggadah and they hide it. The person running the Seder needs to find it. So
That's what we.
oh yeah,
We do one.
the kids hide it. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, cool. That is what the Gemara. I've never heard that as a custom. That's what the Gemara Pesachim says in the 10th paragraph. So we have the custom that I hide it. The person runs the Seder hide it. I remember like the epic hiding places that my father had growing up in our house. Like there's like memorable, and then the kids find it. But either way, the Gemara says the reason why we have that minhag is again engage the kids. They have it at the end of the night late, so the kids are looking around the house trying to find where how you have to find where your kids hit it. That's just to engage the kids.
Back to the coffee beans.
Yeah.
Using a coffee grinder
Yes.
from the year.
Yeah.
Allowed or not allowed?
So yeah, I would empty it out, clean it really well. Yeah, it's just coffee. So since it's only used for things that are Pesach, so I empty it out, clean it out. Does it make me feel a little better? Do you need to? Probably not. But you clean it out really well, and then you grind your beans on.
As
As long as you didn't have flavor.
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be flavored. Also, you look up. I'm not giving you a little homework, but look up about decaffeinated beans. I know a lot of decaffeinated coffee. That all the way. Exactly. Okay, you're good. Yeah. That's why I don't know about it because what's the point?
There were some pulas that were famously given during like that first COVID, second COVID year, specifically with
It's COVID. Eat kidneys, right?
with hot water urns, things like
Yeah.
that. Are those like grandfathered in or?
Yeah, I know.
Only if you're still wearing a mask.
But you have to wear a buttery nose.
Right. So that's good question. So generally, with things that are very replaceable and not expensive, right? Everything is expensive now. So that's going to be a calculation depending on if a family asks me about these kind of things, I'll maybe ask a couple more questions about their basic preparations. But yeah, halakhically speaking, as long as you don't use your hot urn as a blech on Shabbos, we personally do. Okay, we put our challah on top of the hot water urn and it warms up. It's good. So then, if you do that, if that's your practice as your home, do not use it on Pesach. You get a new one
Clean
for
it
sure.
with vinegar.
Huh?
They do for real. Hot
Right.
water, you get all the gunk and stuff in
Yeah.
there.
Right.
So you boil it with vinegar.
Right.
It cleans it out.
Right. So
Vinegar is literally coming.
right. That. So if you're
Right.
right, so then don't use that either. So but if you literally are using it for water and emptying out water and emptying out, so the only problem is like when you're filling up the tradition soup, so the steam could go up to the nozzle and get chametz absorbed in the nozzle, technically. So then the way to kosher it is you do two things. You fill it up and you get it as hot as it can go boiling. There's often that second button to reboil. And then you open the, help me out over here, nozzle lever, okay? And you let the whole thing spill out. So you're really heating up the nozzle a lot. And then you turn the whole thing, pay attention, John, upside down. You boil your kettle.
I bought another one last year.
Okay. Just asking for what? Okay. Then you boil your kettle, and while the hot water is upside down, you pour the boiling water from the kettle on top. When it's upside down, on the bottom side, which is now facing up, of the hot water. But if for $20 you get a new one for Pesach, you have it every year. Huh?
Yeah, where are you getting your money?
I don't do my shopping.
Good thing.
There we go. Busted. Yeah. No, but exactly. If there's a family who's it's very expensive this year Pesach, this is one way that we could use it as long as they don't have these practices to use as a blech or clean it with chametz, so then we'll be okay. Okay. Yes.
While cleaning Pesach, you have to these are
Great question. Some people have I would say minhag too. Some people don't. The core question is: are tiny little crumbs considered chametz? Okay. If you ask twice, my Rabbi, if you ask me, answer is that the baseline halacha is that shiurim, tiny crumbs, are not actually considered chametz. So what he suggests is two things. Number one, starting from after Purim, don't bring books to the table. It's too late. But number two is everyone has like their books that they always bring to the Shabbos table. Like for me, it's like my chumash or like 2 or 3 favorite svarim on the parsha. So on Pesach, don't bring those like classic table books to the table. Those are the two things that he puts in place. But once those two things are into place, unless you have a specific custom to like check every book and to kind of open it upside down and to spot and to kind of open it and to fan through it upside down, then you don't need to. It's not the halacha. That would be kind of a minhag, what we would call MRC, maximum religious. Yeah. Is that it? Excellent. Okay. Well, I wish you would. Well, we do it one last thought, as they say before Pesach. They say kosher v'sameach, and before Purim we say a freilich in Purim. So you have to make sure that your Purim is not so freilich that it becomes not kosher, and you have to make sure that your Pesach is not so kosher that it becomes not freilich. So you have a kosher v'sameach. Okay, beautiful. Everyone,
Yeah.
if anyone wants one of these, you can take it.